Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. And we are 11 o'clock Eastern Time, and it is the 2nd of May, 2024. And our topic for today is the subconscious mind. It's going to be fun. Let's get into the introductions. Shelly Ann, take a stab at it.
Hi, good day. I am Shelly-Ann Edwards Barron from Trinidad and Tobago, and I am a gratitude guide and habit coach. Gratitude guide because I sincerely believe that gratitude is that keystone habit that makes everything fall into place. And habit coach because I believe that with gratitude influencing our habits, we are able to develop the habits that we need to really thrive in this life. What happens to us sometimes when we turn 40, for the majority of people, and for me certainly, is that, when I turned 40, it was like a light bulb went off in my head, and I started looking around me thinking, okay, I'm old enough. What have I accomplished in this life? And not liking what I saw, I started adding and adding and adding to my day, which eventually led to overwhelm and frustration. And that's when I discovered that I can embrace something called discipline. I can pursue my goals with joy. And the way to do that is with gratitude. So I created something called the gratitude strategy, which looks at saying it right. That's working on self talk, making it empowering, and so on. And then we look at saying it aloud, making gratitude tangible and active. And then finally, we work on developing that habit by saying it always, which is getting gratitude into a daily habit. Every morning, saying something that you're grateful for, writing it down, and a few other practices that form the foundation of that keystone habit. And then once we are in that place, we have that discipline involved, and now we're able to add more habits and more positive actions that will help us accomplish our goals and help us get to where we want to be while we're enjoying the journey all along the way. And that's the gratitude strategy. And if you want to hear more about that, you can find me on LinkedIn, you can find me on Facebook, and you can message me on our YouTube channel, the subconscious mind. And I do have some videos on getting it done with gratitude. We're in a little pause on that series right now, but we're coming back soon. So you can check that out on YouTube as well.
Awesome. Awesome. Cass, jump in.
Yeah, hi, I'm Cass J. Henry. I'm an abundance coach working out of Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. I offer my services both in person and virtually. As an abundance coach, it's my job to assist my clients in altering their perspective from one of lack to one of abundance. Together, we'll discover the power of tools like affirmations, habit creation, mindset work, goal setting, experimentation, and journaling, just to name a few, with an overarching goal to achieve a more harmonious balance in your life. If you find yourself feeling stuck and focusing on everything going wrong in your world right now, reach out. Let's do a discovery call. I would love the opportunity to see if we're a good fit and show you the abundance that's in your life right now. You can find me on cassjhenry.com, and I'm really excited about today's topic because, you know, subconscious and mindset, that's really what abundance work is all about. So yeah, Steve.
Awesome. Yeah, it's an exciting topic for sure. And my name is Stephen B. Henry, as you can see, and you can certainly call me Steve. No, I'm known by many online as the coach's coach. I'm a multi niched coaching practitioner, as an experienced online presence consultant, a business success guide, and a personal development mentor. I bring this holistic trifecta together for my clients in a single toolbox. I kind of look at the whole picture. My many years of experience across the spectrum of personal mouth isn't working this morning. My many experiences across the spectrum of personal and business life, and my sincere commitment to ongoing learning inform my approach to work life ethic. By understanding that success is a journey, not a destination, one's goals become more attainable and exceedingly more enjoyable, which is, as Shelley Ann says, the key. And as I often say, the time to hire your guide is before you get lost in the woods. Think about that. And so we're going to jump into today's topic, which is the subconscious mind. And that's been a favorite topic of mine for many, many years. Um, I was probably in my mid teens when I first started thinking about it. What led me to it was the whole concept of synchronicity or coincidences. And a lot of people say, coincidences don't exist. And equally, a lot of scientists say the subconscious mind doesn't exist. It was Freud who first started talking about it in any kind of clinical sense. And there has been a whole lot of research and discussion about it since then. And it has become more and more in the forefront today. There's a lot happening. So I'm going to let Cass and Shelley Ann jump in first and get it started as I get my mouth working again. And we'll figure it out. Go ahead, guys.
Yeah, I think Cass, you could get it started. You have a couple of definitions because before we came on, we were trying to sort of like get a consensus of what exactly the subconscious is and the subconscious mind, and you had shared a couple of really great definitions. So I think we could begin there.
Yeah, I'm actually just going to read this little snippet from TonyRobbins.com. The subconscious mind, the subconscious is the part of our minds that makes decisions without our needing to actively think about them. I think I just tapped into it right there when I said subconscious mind instead of just subconscious. It went automatic, right? It's different from the conscious mind, which encompasses the thoughts we know we are having at any given moment. It's also different from the unconscious mind, which holds past events and experiences that we don't remember at all. So the subconscious mind is different from the conscious and unconscious. It's sort of a little bit like the unconscious, I think, but it has a different operation. And I think we'll get into that.
Yeah, and there was another one you had shared, and I read something similar from Dr. Carolyn Leaf. She has a slightly different definition of the unconscious, but for the subconscious, what she said is that to think of it like a tree that has three parts. So the conscious mind is like the communication and the behavior, what we say and do, and the trunk. So that's like the top of the tree. The trunk area and the grass area is the subconscious mind, which are the prompts from the non conscious mind that are just at the edge of our conscious awareness. So she kind of puts the subconscious as a middle ground between the conscious and what she calls the non-conscious, which is that like deep spiritual core of who we are. She calls it where our truth, value, intelligence, wisdom, and meaning are embedded. So she puts that subconscious kind of between. And I find that fascinating from her perspective because she's a neuroscientist who studies brain and brain function. And it's interesting that she would create that kind of distinction and separation. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
was reading a lot about the brain imaging that they're doing right now and how they can't actually see where things are happening in the subconscious. It's not lighting up sort of specific points of the brain, it's lighting up both the conscious and the unconscious places. So
Hmm.
that middle ground makes a lot of sense.
yeah. If we the concept, the unconscious part of the brain, is something that um, there's a lot of word salad going around with that. Um, and there's a distinct difference between the scientific community and the what we might call the life coaching community in terms of the understanding of the brain and the conscious and subconscious. Um, and it's kind of a difficult thing to envision because we're not conscious of it. So just by
Yeah.
definition, it's a tough thing. But the conscious part of the brain is pretty obvious. That's what that's us thinking. That's the active thinking part of the brain, and we can kind of visualize things in our mind. That's where that is. Um, the unconscious part of the brain is the operating part of the brain that does things. It's the automatic doing of things, the autonomic section of the brain. Our heart beats, we breathe without thinking about it. We can consciously breathe. We can tap into the unconscious part of the brain. We can force ourselves to breathe. We can control our heart rate by consciously thinking about it. Some people better than others. When I was younger, I used to take my heartbeat down to a point where you could almost not detect it. And I could just go into a kind of a stasis sleep type of situation. Can't do that anymore. I probably shouldn't do that anymore. So, we can control those systems. Senses, the sense of touch. We can't turn that on and off by thinking about it. It's automatic. So we can deal with those areas. Now, one of the things that is thrown about is the idea that we only use 10% of our brain. And that's hogwash. Okay, it was actually a misquote. It's one of those misquote things, and I don't have the original quote here, but somebody doing a keynote presentation to a group of people who were involved in some either life coaching or multi-level marketing or something, a big audience of people, made a statement that talked about mentioned the term 10% and talked about thinking and brain and so on. And many people of the audience took it to be that he said we only use 10% of our brain, and it spread like wildfire. Fact is, we use almost all of our brain unless there's sections of it dead. And I like to visualize it a little bit as a brandy snifter. And if you have a brandy snifter, you pour a little bit of really good cognac or brandy into the bottom of it, and you could say, well, we're only using 10% of the brandy snifter, right? It's just that little piece at the bottom. But that's not true. We use the whole brandy snifter. There's structural parts of it that are important. The brain does more than just think. We feed it nutrients through the blood flow, and it works with those nutrients, and mostly carbohydrates, but it needs that nutrients for its function and its energy. In many ways, it's like a muscle. In some ways, it's like an organ. And, we wouldn't say we only use 10% of the liver. But the brandy snifter, again, if you get back to that, it's got this big curved bowl, and we're only putting a little bit of stuff in the bottom of it. So we're only, it's not even half full, let alone half empty. But it is that bowl that contains the aroma of the brandy, and we can take that in. But how does that brandy get its aroma there when the brandy bottle was sitting at room temperature? We pour it into a room temperature snifter. Well, it's our hand that goes under the bowl that warms the brandy a little bit to cause the aroma in that bowl. Well, what about the stock that it has? The little thin piece,
Stem.
stem at the bottom. Well, that's so our fingers can slip around that as we hold the bottom of the bowl. And then the flat piece at the bottom, that sits on the table, well, that keeps it stable so it doesn't fall over and spill. The whole brandy snifter is engaged when we use it. And the brain is similar to that. The whole brain, or unless there's damage to it, the whole brain is engaged and does a variety of things. The subconscious is, as I said, difficult to envision because we're not conscious about it at all. and we don't even see generally, like the heart beats automatically. We have senses, we can feel and smell and see, so we can envision those functions, but we can't sort of envision the subconscious until we become aware of the results. And that's when it comes into our, our being, our understanding. And then we can learn consciously to use the subconscious by feeding it information. And one of the things is that, Shelly Ann, you said about it being aware, having its database. It's actually aware of the entire brain. It knows what's going on in the brain. It's kind of the all-seeing third eye, if you want to think of it that way.
Mm,
And it's like, if I say, where are you in your body? Some people will point to their heart. Some people will point to their head. Many people will point to their eyes. I'm behind my eyes. um, and that subconscious is in there somewhere, and we kind of point to it.
mhm.
So it's there. There's a whole
Yeah.
lot more we can talk about, but I'll turn that over
And
to you guys again.
yeah, and that's the thing for me. I see that there are nuances and variations in the understanding of the subconscious and unconscious. I think for the most part, a lot of people group the subconscious and unconscious together because of how they seem to interact. And as Cass said, there's no physical evidence of the subconscious. But the way I see it is that the one thing that both groups agree on is that there is a part of us that we are aware of on a daily basis, moment by moment, that we're thinking and making decisions. And then there's a part of us that runs underneath that as a sort of undercurrent that influences how we make decisions and our behaviors. And so for me, when I think of the subconscious, I think of that thing, that um, awareness that's underneath the surface awareness of what I'm saying. Like right now, speaking, hand moving, a lot of it, I am conscious of it, even though sometimes, the hand movement, it just happens. But for the most part, I do see, especially when I'm on a live like this and I see my hands, I am aware that they're moving and I choose to keep them moving to continue the conversation. But so for me, when I think subconscious, I think of what's operating in the background, and that is it's an important consideration when it comes to like habit formation, and leaving off habits that you are no longer interested in keeping, habits that you think no longer serve you, and so on. What is feeding this and what makes something a habit is when it gets into that sub level operation, where it's no longer something conscious that you have to deliberately do, but it's something that kind of happens. And so that's where you really want things to get into. I call it the default. So it gets into your default mode, and that's where you want, for the most part, your habits to be, the ones that you want to keep. And then the ones that you don't want to keep any longer, you interrupt that. And that is where the change comes in. So you interrupt the flow, you interrupt the default in order to influence it and replace it with something else that is, better serving to you. And so when it comes to the discussion of subconscious and conscious, that's the distinction that I make, because I feel like for most people who don't really want to get into all the scientific nuance, that's enough for them to understand that there's something running underneath that is collecting information and operating on your behalf. And if you leave it as it is, it could be operating with knowledge that no longer serves you. And so that's how I just make that distinction. It's easier to work with that way, I
I
think.
really like driving is as a skill set as an example of this. If you've been driving for a long time, most people have at some point sort of gone off on a tangent of thinking in their brain while they're driving. And all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, how did I get to this intersection? I wasn't even thinking anything for the last 10 minutes. Why did I not, steer the car off into a ditch and have a big crash? And that's because that subconscious part of your brain, that unconscious part of your brain is driving the car for you. And it's actually a better driver than your conscious mind is. They've done studies with this. I remember when I first, I can't remember the study, but I remember when I first read about it, one of the things I thought was, wouldn't it be kind of neat if you could have this little thing that dangles from your rearview mirror that you like push on it and it does this flashing light thing and it puts you into the subconscious mind, and then everybody would just be a better driver. But we don't have that.
Well,
but
we actually almost do. That's called self-driving cars.
Yeah, they're not necessarily better.
And also, it depends on that person's subconscious driver, right? Is that subconscious driver an actually good driver? I know it's probably better than the conscious, but remember, the subconscious has a whole lot of influences to it. So I'm thinking,
and I was just going to say that there are ways that we influence that we can choose to influence that, which I think we'll talk a lot about in our time. Like things like you've talked about gratitude and habits, things like affirmations, things like repetition being a really good way to get something that just sticks in there. And the other and the other thing is opposite action. So if you have one of those habits that's just sticky and it's not coming out and you want to change it, doing the opposite thing or the thing that you want to happen 3 or 4 times every time you do the thing that you don't want to happen, so that you're rewriting more times over top of it. And those are some of the ways that we can get into our subconscious mind. We can program some of that.
It's
go ahead,
very,
Steve.
very interesting that you've both alluded to this. The idea that the subconscious mind has its own area of memory and it has access to all of our memories. And both of those things are critical to understanding how it works. We can, Cass, as you just said, by repetition and doing, we can feed the subconscious, and we sort of build up a pattern of things that can occur with the subconscious. And that seems everything that I'm saying about the subconscious. I've worked with it for literally decades, and I'm quite confident of many of these things. However, they're observations. It's
anecdotal, qualitative.
It's anecdotal, and truly in the science. Cass, you mentioned early on about brain imaging studies being done and having difficulty even locating where the subconscious is, only finding that it lights up multiple places. So there's some kind of sort of, control room, super control that's over all of the brain. Whereas other things that we do light up one place in the brain, and so we can connect that doing with that place. And the scientists, well, they don't all agree, but they tend to agree to disagree. Let's put it that way. There's a lot of scientists who say that the subconscious is a figment of your imagination, which is an interesting way to say about it. That it does not exist in reality. It's a creation of your conscious mind. It's how your conscious mind deals with what it might otherwise not deal with, and not want to deal with. And it's in its intensity, it's insanity. And they look at it that way, and they say that's what Freud was really kind of getting to. On the other hand, there are a large number of scientists who are actively exploring what the subconscious mind is. So they must kind of accept that it's there to spend all that time doing that. And there's some neuroscientists and even neuro practitioners, brain doctors, and so on, that have spent a great deal of effort and time exploring what it is. So that dichotomy makes it very difficult. And so I want to qualify that I'm somewhere in the middle of that, like the quotation Shelley Ann had about the subconscious being in the middle. I'm somewhere in the middle of that from my own experience and my own interest in having done this for so long. And one of the things that I can say about the subconscious mind is that it appears that we can talk to it. It appears that we can control it by thought or verbal word, and as well as the actions that Cass mentioned, and definitely by repetitive action. But when we think, whatever we think, and about whatever we think, it influences or informs the subconscious mind, and it seems that the subconscious mind takes action based on our thoughts. And so a lot of what occurs in our life comes because of what we're thinking about. And if we're thinking negative or bad or you know
Unhealthy
unhealthy, not
thoughts.
the
Hmm.
things that we really want, even if we don't really know what we really want, we think we're thinking what we want, the subconscious mind will tend to work to deliver those things to us. And so we often say, we are who we think we are. And that is a factor of the subconscious mind. And so we can control our thoughts, our conscious thoughts.
Hmm.
We can control those and we can tell the subconscious what to do. And it apparently works better if we verbalize those things, not just think about them, but put words
Sorry.
and say them.
And
It,
I'm
it
thinking, feel it
enforces,
too.
yeah, embrace it. Yeah. And
Hmm.
so it's something that we are, or at least can be, in control of. But one final point I'll make before I give it back again is that the subconscious mind seems to only understand the affirmative. It cannot make judgments, or it only understands things as if they are affirmatives. So if you say, I don't want broccoli, it's going to go and do everything it can to get you broccoli. And that's a whole different discussion of what it can do. But we do that in our lives a lot. I'm tired of being poor. Well, okay, subconscious mind will make you poor because it only understands that you want what you say. It doesn't
Yeah.
understand the judgment of what you say. And that's where most people will say that the subconscious, which is actually the focal point of the law of attraction, doesn't work. It doesn't exist, doesn't work. Because if I've said what I want, no, you've said what you don't want. And so it gives you what you don't want because it
Yeah.
Where
can't.
focus goes, energy flows, right?
There you
That's
Yes.
go.
Tony Robbins for you.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
that's
that's for me, that's what I think about when I think about any kind of influence on the subconscious, any kind of desire to change habit and acting on it. We spoke about the thought and so on, and the fact that the subconscious, that there's information coming there. What I think about the most is that we operate on more than one sense. And so we have the five senses that we acknowledge and we're taught readily, and then we have movement and emotion and different other aspects of senses that round out our sense and interaction with the world. And what we find is that sometimes when we're working on habits in particular, we focus on one aspect of the habit and not the entire environment. And in my practice and interaction, what I've found is that we need to spread our view a little bit wider to incorporate all the other things that are happening in the environment with this habit that we're trying to either add or remove. What are the other factors contributing to it? What is the environment like? What are the smells like? What are the tactile sensations like? What do we hear? And so when we include as many of those senses and a wider view of the environment in this input that we are influencing the subconscious with, I feel like it has like multiple points to hold on to and say, yeah, this person, I think they're serious. I think this is really what it is. This is going to work, and so it holds on to that. And so, in addition to phrasing it in a way that we're focusing on the thing that we don't want, we also neglect the other aspects of who we are in terms of our senses, and that makes a huge difference.
It's the classic story about the basketball team, right? Where they did the study where they had one set of people who did basketball free throws, and they kept doing as many as they could in a day, and they studied that, and then they had a control group that did no baskets at all, no trying to do anything for a certain amount of time, and then they had a third group that was not in the basketball court. They were just sitting in chairs, and they were visualizing themselves making these perfect throws, and they were encouraged to think about what it smells like when you're on the court, think about what it sounds like when you're in the game, and think about how you feel when you make that basket, and visualize a perfect shot every time. And they did all three of these for 6 weeks, and at the end of the 6 weeks they brought everybody back, and they tested how much improvement they'd have. And of course, as you would think, the group that didn't practice had no improvement really. The ones that did practice had some improvement, but the ones who visualized it, they weren't even touching a ball. They just visualized making those shots. They had the most improvement out of these three groups. And so when you bring in the whole sensation of what
Yeah.
you're trying to do, that visualization, you are bringing in the full picture. That's how you make change. That's how you end up with more baskets or
Yeah.
more whatever it is you're trying to do, right?
Yeah, I've had a program for many years called Success in a Year, and I do less with it today, partly because these days people want instant gratification, and nobody wants to study for a year on something, to gain success. But it has 12 modules, and they may be able to be condensed down to 12 shorter periods than months. But the very first module focuses on visualization. That is so foundational to what we do. And it's talked about in all areas of coaching, whether it's sports coaching or life coaching or, therapy and all kinds of other areas. And it's also in physical training and job training and so on. You get people to visualize what they're doing as well as actually doing it, because that visualization, and by visualization we don't mean look at it, although that's part of it too, but we mean see it in your head the way you want it to be, controlled visualization, and the outcomes are phenomenal. And a lot of training programs and coaching programs either ignore it or skip over it fairly quickly because the results are not immediate. And building a habit, the results are not immediate. So many good things that we could do are not immediate, and
Yeah.
especially now today in our smartphone environment, we want instant gratification. Reels, are a minute and a half. If you had an hour long reel, people aren't going to look at it. People don't take in whole newscasts anymore. They get little snippets of news on the social media, and we've in many ways we are stopping the use of our subconscious mind. It's still working there and still doing things we don't know about, we can't be conscious of, but we're not using it. We're not feeding it properly. We're not taking advantage of its immense power. We really do have in our consciousness, we have an amazing tool that we can learn to use and utilize in our daily lives. And one of the areas that I'm very, very interested in, and I teach now, is the law of attraction. And just about everybody knows about it today. The movie The Secret probably brought it into mainstream. It's been around for a long, long time in terms of the community that is behind life coaching and that area. But it's also misunderstood, and the subconscious is foundational to it. It is the part between us, our consciousness, and the universe, whatever the universal scope is. Um, and it is that communication portal. And so, if we don't make use of it, and like so many other things in our existence, if we don't make use of them, they can atrophy or go away. And I think society wide, we are doing a disservice to ourselves by opting in and reacting and accepting instant gratification rather than gratitude, which takes time to develop. And I talk with my hands too, and I found that a very interesting thing. The speaking with your hands is a function of the subconscious. It is the subconscious trying to put what it is that you're thinking into the process, and along with putting it into speech and conscious thinking, it's feeding it into your muscular system as well without you being conscious of it. When you become conscious of it, as you said, Shelley Ann, then the conscious can take over and you can fold your hands together, put them down on the table, whatever you choose to do to control it. And over time, as Cass has done, she's built a habit of not using her hands a lot when speaking. And she does a little to make gestures and make a point, but not so much. So we see that we can, through habit, we can do these things. But it is the subconscious, that is, it's kind of like Venn diagrams. If you take your emotions and your various senses and you all overlap them, that little bit of common space, that's the
Mhm.
subconscious working for you.
And that permeates into every aspect of our lives because there is something within education called multisensory learning. And that's what I use a lot in my classes when I teach creative writing. And it's not primarily used for creative writing. And that's one of the reasons why so many people struggle still with that because we see it, traditionally it has been this like singular listen, write, read, write without really embracing the other senses. But multisensory learning promotes that we learn best when we're exposed to learning through multiple senses at the same time or over a series of experiences. And the research and theory that said, we are, tactile learners or visual learners and so on, there is actually no evidence to support that theory, and current educational research is saying that there is no truth in that. So that if I say, well, okay, I'm a visual learner, so present me with experiences that are visual and I learn best, current research doesn't actually support that. Research supports present me with sounds and smells and tastes and touch and visual stimuli, present me with multiple things, and that is when I learn best. And the way I see it is like when we interact with life as human beings, we don't interact with life in a singular way. Yeah, it's not that. It's open. So while we're engaging now with sound mainly because we're speaking, we're also getting the smells from our environment. We're feeling the chairs that we're sitting in. We get the visual stimuli because we're looking at it, and the touch and everything, the movement with the hands and everything incorporates into the experience. And so it makes logical sense to me that if this is how we interact with life, then this is how we learn about life. Therefore, if I want to be intentional about learning something in particular, then doing that will stimulate and emulate and allow me an advantage in learning. And so it just makes sense that if I want to change a habit, adopt one or remove one, then that's what I have to do as well. It's complete. And it because I think about it and I read about it a lot, it just makes sense. But the practice is a whole other story.
I really like that sorry, what is it called?
Multisensory
Multi-sensory
learning.
learning.
The multi-sensory learning. I really like that. It brings in the other piece of supporting subconscious that I like to talk about, which is controlling your environment. So where you're learning something, we don't take our kids to a 4-lane meets 4-lane highway to practice driving, right? We, for the first time, here I am with driving again, but yeah, we take them to a parking lot or some place that we can control the safety of them as they start doing that for the first time, because driving takes all your senses. It takes all your concentration to be able to do. And so if you are distracted and you are afraid, then you're not going to be able to focus on what you're doing. And so I think that when it comes to supporting new habits creation, there's also there's the things that you can do consciously that are supporting your subconscious, like the environment, choosing the people that you spend time with. If you have somebody in your life who's just always negative, who's just always breaking down the things that you're learning and saying, oh, well, that's not real, or something to that effect, that's going to make a huge difference to how you feel about it. One of my favorite sayings is, whether you think you can or you can't, you are right. And the first time I heard that, it was such a clicking in moment of being like, yeah. So my subconscious is working really hard to help me with these habits that I want to create or habits that I want to stop. And if I'm not supporting it by the environment that I'm in, the people that I spend time with, accepting that failure isn't a failure. It's a way to learn more. You learn from that failure that you don't do that again, or that you do try it in a different way. And so that's
experimentation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So visualizing comes in there. And there was another example, I can't think of it right now. It just slipped my conscious mind. But yeah, like building up all these scaffolding supporting pieces to the learning that you want to do, and giving it the best opportunity to by repetition and time. They say 3 to 4 weeks or 21 days, or how often have you tried something for 21 days? People give up after the second week. People say
After
it's
the
not working
second
for me.
day,
This
sometimes.
doesn't work for me.
But just the first time is like, nope.
Yeah, doesn't work. Yeah.
And the thing,
I've been involved in the education system over the years, and both as a participant and as an instructor. And I was fortunate to have great teachers along the way. I've had a few doozies, but I've had just some great teachers that I really thank for what they did. And I had a math teacher once who took a kind of a different approach to exams, and he passed out a sheet of 8.5 by 11 blank, what we would call copy paper now, typewriter paper then, that he passed out to all the students 2 weeks before the exam, the final exam, and he said, you can write whatever you want on this paper and take it into the exam with you. And we said, oh, that's not allowed. And he said, I allow it in my exams. It's fine. You can do that. And he showed us his paper. He had a college professor. This was in high school. And he had a college professor previously who had done that. And that's where he picked it up. And he kept his paper and he showed it. And he had both sides. And he had a very fine point pen. And he'd written in little tiny words that you had to have good eyesight to read. And covered both sides of the page with all the formulas and all this stuff. And they said, go ahead, do it, whatever you want. You'll be allowed to take it in. Don't worry. The people that are going to be, monitoring the exam, they know, and everything's fine. And so we took our paper and we got a fine point pen and we started doing the stuff. And when I got into the exam, I never referenced the paper, not once, because I had done it. I had taken the time to look up all the formulas and make sure I got them written down properly and thought what they did while I was doing it. And so I never looked at the sheet once. And most of the people who took the exam had the same experience. And, that was astonishing to feel that. And you mentioned senses, and we talk about our five senses. And of those five senses, many people would think that sight is the most powerful. It's what we use the most, and they think that visualization has to do with vision, but only in part. And vision actually isn't the most powerful sense. The sense of smell is, in
Yeah.
most powerful in terms of how it affects our mind, how it affects our thinking, how it affects our
And
reaction.
memory.
Memory, exactly. So, the idea of deja vu, you're walking down a street and suddenly it feels like you've been here before. But if you stop and think and smell, you'll realize, oh, it's the bake shop around the corner that it brings back
Hmm.
memories of another place where there was a bake shop. I wasn't really here before at all. So I
Yeah.
would teach a methodology of study. Many, many teachers will say to their students, now you be sure and study for the exam, but they never teach them how to study.
Yeah.
I see that in so many disciplines. They tell, but they don't teach. And that's a problem. And so I would explain to the students not only what to do, but why. And I would describe that their study environment, as Cass says, that they need to be quiet, get a desk or a clean table and a hardback chair, and sit at that table to study, because they want to, as close as possible, replicate what they're going to be when they write the exam, in a chair with a table, a desk, and then turn off that radio that you're listening to, or record player, or whatever it is, your smartphone with the speaker adapter on it, whatever it is, turn that off, because that's not going to be playing in the examination room.
Yeah.
And do all of these different things, make notes of what you're studying. Don't just read, because read is one sense, but then when you know replay that through your mind to your hand with a pencil or a pen
Hmm.
and write it down, now you've involved the sense of touch.
Yeah.
And
And even the sound of the writing
of the right, yeah.
on the paper, and the sound of the movement in the chair
Oh, well,
is
and
is
the movement, yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
and the
the
movement.
movement
And
itself, the
so
muscle
it's
movement.
complete.
Yes,
And
all of it.
yeah,
Let me
and
go
for
one
me,
step further here, though. I would
mhm,
get the students, including the guys, I would say, go borrow one of your mom's perfumes, and if it's a girl, a perfume that you don't like, that you don't wear, you wouldn't wear. When you study, put a dab of it on your wrist before you start studying. Study. Guys, put a dab of it on your, perfume? Yeah, put a dab of it on yours. When you go to the exam, just before you go into the exam, put a dab of it on your wrist. Not enough that people can smell it all over the room, just a tiny dab that's close to you that you're going to smell it.
yep,
Because the smell when you study adds to the brain,
mhm,
clarifies in the brain. And when you're writing the exam, that identical smell, which is not a usual smell for you, it won't work with your own cologne or perfume. You've got to try something totally different.
because it has to trigger
It
the memory.
triggers
Yeah,
exactly those
yeah,
memories. And that is so powerful. And
yeah,
it is, when you said it, I hadn't even thought in preparation for today the idea of all the senses. But it
yeah.
is
It's
so
important.
critical, yeah, to what is there. I do it all the time without thinking.
Because it's become a habit, and what
Yeah,
you've done is to prime your subconscious that this works and this is
yeah,
useful. And so what happens a lot in studying smell, um, we're told research says that they most of our senses go to a central point in our brains and then it's relayed to the rest of the body. Smell goes direct to where it wants to go and where it needs to go. So there's less of a delay in the impact of smell. And that's one of the reasons why it is more powerful than all the other senses, because there's almost like a direct line to remember this, do that, or whatever the situation is when it comes to smell. And so when I first started researching the multisensory concept of learning, it really blew my mind. Now, there are some practitioners that take it to the extreme and they do hand gestures and movement and some interesting and awkward things. It doesn't have to be quite that way as long as we understand what it does. And Cass mentioned the environment. We've spoken about the environment before, and we do need to understand the full scope of environment because environment does not only mean physical, it also means emotional and social and mental. And so we have to think about things like what is actually practical, tangible in our space, like you said, straight back chair, desk, and so on. But then are we hungry when we're going to study? Are we tired when we're going to study? You know, are we emotionally distressed when we're going to study? Are we mentally exhausted when we're going to study? All of these things, all of these different aspects of the environment coming to play. And so it applies to study, it applies to work, it applies to every aspect of who we are, because as human beings, we function on these tangible levels
Yeah.
as well.
Don't
And I found that so fascinating.
don't chew gum when you're studying if you're not allowed to chew gum in the exam room. Little things like that can make a difference, a significant difference in the outcomes. And it's
Sorry,
because our subconscious, evaluates all of those things. I think Cass started off by talking about all of the experience that's there that is beyond our conscious, that the subconscious is aware of. And we can
Yeah.
harness that. We can harness that. Sorry, Cass, I cut you off.
yeah, sorry I had to disappear for a second there, so I'm not sure if this got covered. But when you were talking about your mother's perfume, there's also the aspect that your mother is probably a calming
Mm.
figure in your life, and if it smells like your mother, and it can bring about that sense of self protection and calm, and it helps with the fear you have when you're writing an exam,
Yeah,
right? So it's bringing its own memory with it, if that's what you're using.
Mhm.
great,
And
great
completing the
observation.
aspect of the environment, that emotional situation that's happening as you're studying and going into the exam. So it's really a complete thing. So the visualizing and all of that. And for me, I do it for work as well. And when I'm about to teach as a professional educator. So it's not just when I am studying, but I do it when I'm entering a classroom.
Mhm.
I mean, I've been teaching for years and I could say decades at this point. And the when my first class session, every single time meeting new students brings up a lot of anxiety for me. And so I do the visualization and I do the different things and I do the tangible things as well in my space. I try to make the space, familiar and comforting and, remember and all those things to help me guide my process. And when the anxiety peaks, I do the 5 4 3 2 1 grounding exercise, which includes the physical and includes other senses. And that is such a game changer. I tell everybody about that and I teach it to my kids when they, my students. And you know 5 things that you see, 4 things that you hear, 3 things that you can touch, 2 things that you can smell, 1 thing that you can taste. It reminds us of the physical and interrupts the distress that's happening mentally and emotionally, and it grounds us. And I think the multisensory approach, excuse me, the multisensory approach has that grounding capacity to it, which is why I really love it so much. And showing students that, hey, writing is about a lot more than, trying to pass this exam. It's a lot more than, just putting the words on the paper. Where do the words come from? Where do the ideas come from? It's about life. And it's just, I can talk about this for a long time. So I'm going to put a pause here, but
Mm,
I really see it as completely engaging, and it allows you to have an experience. And that's what I love about the whole process and the philosophy, that you have an experience. And not only is it awesome for those of us who might think we are, coloring within the lines, but for everybody, for even those who color outside of the lines as well, those who embrace freer thinking and that type of thing. And in the scientific world, in the educational world, we call some students neurodivergent and some, neurotypical. It works for all categories because all human beings function within the senses. Some might have sensitivities, and we have to pay attention to that, but the other senses operate and function. And so for me, this is like the foundation of inclusive education. And it's something that I really believe in, that if we include everybody, then everybody is included. We don't have to teach to this or teach to that. If we do it in an inclusive way, we're all covered.
Cass, go
I
ahead.
really like, yeah, I was gonna say I really like that philosophy. It's very in line with my disability justice that I always, if you're crafting a space for people who have specific disabilities, what you craft will work for all people. And it's about being inclusive and thinking about that stuff ahead of time so that
Yeah.
the people who come to it don't have to make adjustments.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, thinking of it ahead of time. And I think coming back to the subconscious mind and what we've been discussing in terms of the environment and the interruptions, if we want to stop something, or the inclusion, if we want to add something, the idea is that while we are embracing the capacity of the subconscious mind, we're also engaging the conscious mind, because the two work together. So it's not as if we are leaving off one or the other, or saying that we need to focus only on one. The fact that we are concentrating and thinking about it means the conscious is engaged anyway. And so it's really about thinking of things ahead of time and preparing our space, preparing our environment. And I've heard it said, setting ourselves up to win. And I love that phrase because that's really what it is. We're not setting ourselves up for failure, we're setting ourselves up to win. We are priming our subconscious. We are activating conscious and subconscious so that there's congruence
Mhm.
in an activity. Yeah.
Yeah, it's ideal. I think we're coming up to the hour. Are we there now? And
I think we have a few seconds.
we've covered a huge amount of material here today, and expressed some very interesting aspects of this. It's the power of threes, I guess, the way we bring these things together. And folks understand that other than minor conversation just before we go on, we don't get together and prepare this. This is open conversations by international coaches for sure. And one thing leads to another. We got a little bit divergent in some of the things we were talking about, but they are all supportive of what we're supposed to be talking about. It's just To me, I've got things going through my head now that I'm going to be thinking about all day, and I love it. Cass, do you have a topic for next week?
I was wondering about growth as a topic.
Ooh.
I don't think we've specifically touched on that. And I think it's sort of like how you see that the subconscious is actually working is through growth.
And you're referring to mental and emotional and sensory growth as opposed to physical growth, I would think.
Yeah, personal and interpersonal growth. Yeah.
Okay.
Empowerment and so on. Yeah, I like that.
Mm-hmm.
I very much like that. Do we all agree? We'll tag that
Yes.
as we'll put a pin in it for next week, and we'll get going there. Awesome. Thank you to the both of you being here, and thank you to everybody who's watching this live. A little bit of difficulty in where we can post it. And those watching the replay, I'll be putting it on my regular group um, when we're done here fairly quickly. It's funny that Facebook will allow us to share into a group something that we're not able to actually activate live into the group. I don't understand them.
Well, don't tell them yet.
Yes.
Don't let them figure it out.
Oh, yeah, okay. I let them. Yeah, sorry about that. You can blame me for no longer being able to stream to your own timeline. Oh well. Thanks, guys. We'll see you all again soon. Bye bye.
Yeah. See you next week. Bye bye.
Bye.